For our next session, I'd like to invite the chairperson, Dr. Sandeep Saluja. He is a very senior GI surgeon who's completed his MCH from AIIMS New Delhi. He is currently working as a professor in the Department of GI Surgery at GB Pant Hospital, New Delhi. I'd like him to invite our speaker, Dr. KJ Singh.
Some hardware problem.
Exactly.
An appropriate time to happen just before the hardware malfunction lecture.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I had the true thing what we are going to discuss right now. And since morning, I was listening everything for last 1.5 hours. And the moment time it came, my own hardware got just disconnected. So it is nice way for me to now introduce the topic that the surgical hardware, which is less often talked of, is one of the most important thing which might be helping a surgeon to prevent all what we were talking about, any intraoperative injury. So without taking any more time, I would like to invite Dr. KJ Singh to enlighten us about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. My regards to all ladies and gentlemen attending the academic feast. The brief entrusted to me for today is surgical hardware malfunction, and we've had an adequate practical demonstration of what it means. It is at the outset, I must express my gratitude to Professor V.K. Kapoor, my teacher, my mentor, and Ajay Sharma, my colleague, for inviting me to contribute to this academic feast. And in fact, I benefited from revising the topic as I was preparing for this deliberation. I'll take you through a brief video before I start my talk. You see this, just second for, can you see that? Now, this person was working on a cylinder. This is a gas cylinder, oxygen cylinder. This is the workshop where they are packed. And that's what happened to the oxygen cylinder. So you can well imagine what all can go wrong in the kind of stuff we use. And I'll come on to other hardware also. Going on to my presentation, this all started when I was discussing a major accident that I had in my operation theater a couple of weeks back. I shared it on my WhatsApp, and Professor Kapoor, then he suggested that we must take it to a larger audience for the benefit of all new young budding surgeons, so that they can anticipate such hardware failures and be equipped to manage them. I will take my talk into 4 sections. I'll introduce the topic. I will present brief evidence relating to surgical hardware malfunction. I will relate it to the procedure of laparoscopic cholecystectomy, and then I will briefly relate it to the specific hardwares which can create real problems in our conduct of laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Now, this is what exactly happened. I will take you through the connecting wire of the carbon dioxide cylinder here that burst. Now, this is a high quality wire tube. This is not a simple plastic tube. We use high quality tubes, but evidently everything was fine. But just as we started insufflating the abdomen, the tube gave away from here, and this is what happened to the cylinder. It just blasted off from the back of the trolley, breaking this latching support, and this is what happened. Now you can imagine my prerogative. The patient is anesthetized. It's draped. We are all scrubbed, and this is what happens. So it took us almost half an hour to surmount this real kind of an emergency situation with all carbon dioxide filling up the operation theater. So this is what happened. Now I will start my the deliberation, and now you see this is our these are the towers. The front is very impressive. But the problem happens in the back. You see all these wires. This is where the problems start. This is okay for handling. These are basically screens and the face. But any loose connections here, you see, you can see how many things can go wrong here. You see, these are the connectors here, these connectors here, the gas connection, the electrical connection. Any loose connection here can cause sparking and then can cause a malfunction in the hardware to which it is attaching. The visual signal cables, if they are loosely connected, they can cause a problem in the data depiction on the monitor. So that's what happens once we do not maintain our hardware from the backside also. It is very vital to take a peep, just like pilots and co-pilots circumspect their aircraft before going in for the flight. We must always take a peep on the backside of the tower, and we are going to pick up a lot of things. This was a slide which I had made. There was a technical issue yesterday also, just before that beautiful lecture, the concluding lecture of yesterday's session. And as luck would have it, we had another hardware glitch today, just before my talk starts. So innovations have been intrinsic to mankind ever since we came into existence. Surgery also could not remain away from innovations, and it metamorphosed through countless innovations till its primal standards, which we've reached now. Innovation, however, is a double-edged weapon. It levies upon us tremendous overt as well as hidden costs, which in critical disciplines like interventional arm of healthcare, aviation, nuclear establishments, etc., cause exactly the reverse of what they are intended to deliver. A small case vignette which demonstrate how disastrous surgical hardware malfunction can be. This is a young lady having undergone 3 surgeries, one index lap chole followed by immediate 2 laparotomies, and you can very well see that the problem is still remaining. This is the condition in which she was brought to us. Evidently, we were going in for another laparotomy, and this was going to be a life-saving laparotomy. We ultimately lost this patient to COVID pneumonitis, even though she was recuperating well after the 3rd damage control laparotomy. During the 3rd laparotomy, what we saw was a disaster, nearly a transected duodenum gaping right onto our faces. Now, you can well imagine this kind of injury is not possible to produce. Even if you tell me to cut the duodenum like this, or any surgeon, he'll not be able to do it. So there was something which was happening, which was not into the knowledge of the surgeon, and it kept on happening for a long time, and eventually presented late post-operatively. Not exactly late, but after a couple of, the patient was perfectly fine after lap chole, but 3 to 4 days later, she started pouring out bile in litters. So this case vignette re-emphasizes the importance of addressing surgical hardware malfunction and how serious it can mean to surgeon as well as patients. In strict sense, this is not a technical complication of surgery. It qualifies well to be included into the ambit of technological complications of surgery. All the same, the onus remains on the surgeon. This paradox of innovation is now the focus of research in each of these critical domains. And a lot of effort is now being directed at identifying and then systematically circumventing the detriments of innovation and technology, so that we may reap only the benefits of it. At the outset, it would be our honest submission to concede that laparoscopic cholecystectomy is being conducted in 2 formats in most developing countries. One is institution-based, that is the ideal, or you may call it the utopian kind of conduct of this surgery, and the second is a compromised field-based. We have to accept this, because in the field, there are constraints of ambience, constraints of equipment standards, and the biggest constraint is the skill of the human resource, which is out there to assist the surgeon. This is the basis of why we must know this. If you're not cognizant of full potential of the weapons in your arsenal, you'll keep facing instances of their malfunction. And the hardware malfunctions, the gamut of hardware malfunctions I define to take you ahead is, it may be hardware non-function, it may be consequences arising from faulty calibration of hardware, or it may be consequences arising from surgeon not anticipating the collateral damaging potential of hardware in their armamentarium. The last scenario is the most disastrous. Last one, this one. When the surgeon is not cognizant of all the knowledge about the hardware that he's using, he can get into major trouble. It affords an opportunity of your weapons using you instead of you using them. That's where the trouble starts. Now, I'll take you a very quick evidence. What we have in a cohort of 210 cases, it was identified that at least 30% had one device-related interruption. And the authors concluded that understanding the nature of the device-related interruptions can help guide implementation of safety interventions and user training in the future. User training in the future is the most important aspect of what we are looking at. The second study, in this, the authors observed that equipment-related failures form a substantial proportion of all errors occurring in the OT, and those procedures that rely more heavily on technology may bear a higher proportion of equipment-related errors. There is a clear benefit in the use of preoperative checklist-based systems, specifically directed towards the equipment. And the authors, based on their conclusion, propose the adoption of an equipment check, which may be incorporated into the current WHO checklist. The last evidence which I will present today is the relationship of acute mental stress to surgical performance. This study has demonstrated a direct relationship between acute mental stress and worse technical surgical performance in a live operating theater. Now, what happens is, the corollary of the surgery to my topic is hardware malfunctions are an unequivocal cause responsible for inducing mental stress in the operating surgeon, and thus have potentials of compromising outcomes of surgical procedures. So we have to keep away from hardware malfunctioning, and that's prevention is better than cure. Now, specifically, laparoscopic cholecystectomy is a befitting prototype model of a critical surgery that depends heavily upon surgical innovations. The laparoscopic surgeon of today, just a moment, much more is hence demanded from the laparoscopic surgeon aside from knowledge, wisdom, and skill of surgery alone. The laparoscopic surgeon is expected to be aware of mechanics of instrumentation, at least a working knowledge of electrical fundamentals, and above average knowledge of electronics, and above average knowledge of computers, specifically the video aspects, a specialist knowledge of theory complemented with practicals and troubleshooting of energy sources. So what's there in a name? We all know rose will smell as sweet, even if called by any other name. And first of all, let's get on to the individual machines. First of all, it's neither diathermy nor cautery honey. It is called electrosurgical unit. The most important point, the instrument which malfunctions to create problem, as that happened in the case Viginet, I would tell you how, in which manners that duodenum could have blasted and the way it was. It's called the electrosurgical unit. You may call it diathermy or cautery. It doesn't matter because the function will remain the same, but it will unmask your ignorance about the machine. The moment you call it diathermy or cautery, it means that you're not sure of the exact potential of the machine and what exactly is the principle behind it. So now getting on to the electrosurgical unit, you see it, we all know that it's got two modes, cut and coagulate. They have different settings and they are very specific for usage. The cut has low voltage, high current, and the coagulate has high voltage, low current, and the voltage in coagulate mode can go up to 9,000 volts. The cut works at a power of 50 to 80 watts, and the coagulate works at a power of 30 to 50 watts. The cut mode is a continuous undampened waveform, and that coagulation mode is an interrupted dampened waveform. This is very relevant. I'll come in a little later. Tissue temperatures can exceed 100 degrees centigrade in cut and really very high than this in the coagulation mode. The charring and tissue damage is much less in the cut mode, whereas in the coagulation modes of fulguration, which we call spray, and desiccation, that is direct contact, the charring is much higher. If you see, these are the absolute modes of pure cut and coagulation. And if you see the voltage in pure cut is low, the charring is low, and the coagulation mode, the voltage is high, and the charring and tissue damage is also high. You see this, the cut and the surrounding damage which you see in the coagulation. So we have to be very, very clear what we are using. There's a cocktail of pure cut and coagulate, which is known as the blend. And we also use blend at certain scenarios, specific scenarios. Now, this is the waveform which I was telling. This is the pure cut, and this is low voltage. This is coagulation. This is high voltage. You must know that during coagulation, the machine is delivering all the energy within 6% of the time in which you are activating it. 94% of the time of your foot pedal pressing, the machine is actually not delivering. So it is delivering high voltage in small time. That's why it causes more heat and more damage, collateral damage in the tissues around. So you'll be very clear when you are using coagulation. Pure cut is a little safer, and the blend has a couple of cocktails in which there's a 50-50 cut coagulate, there's a 40-60 cut coagulate, and there's a 25-75 cut coagulate. The other thing which you need to know very, very clearly before you embark upon laparoscopic cholecystectomy is the direction of the current of the electrosurgical unit. Since we are usually using monopolar circuit, a monopolar electrosurgical unit in our laparoscopic cholecystectomy, this is the electrosurgical unit, which you call cautery. Okay, so it generates a current which is delivered by the pencil, that is the monopolar electrode, into the tissues, and that gets grounded by the grounding pad and back to the electrosurgical unit. This grounding pad is a very, very important aspect of laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Most of the problems of malfunction are related to this pad. I will come to it later. Bipolar is a relatively safer option because here the current is not dissipated to the whole of the body. It's only localized to that area of application, going through one prong and getting out through the other. So we need to know how it can fail. And the first way the electrosurgical unit can fail is unintended direct application of the hot tip to tissues. That may happen in momentary diversion of surgical attention away from the surgical procedure. Maybe the anesthetist is telling you something, or maybe if you are receiving a call, which ideally you should not, but in the private sector it happens that the mobile of the surgeon is never usually off. So suppose the surgeon is taking a call and he's also handling the cautery. It can be an unintended direct application. Forgetting to disconnect the cautery lead from a dissecting instrument, that will be Maryland grasper scissor. If you for a moment wanted to coagulate with a grasper but forgot to take off the lead, and then if somebody accidentally presses the pedal, you had it. Engaging a mobile organ that has not been adequately stabilized with graspers can slip during the application of current, and then can create a problem of unintended site coagulation or cutting. Sudden exaggerated respiratory efforts due to lightening of planes of anesthesia or regional anesthesia. You see, most of the lap chole is being done in the field under spinal anesthesia. We have to concede that. And during spinal anesthesia, the patient is awake, and especially when the procedure becomes prolonged, the patient coughs or moves due to pain. And that's when you are also doing critical dissection in the hepatocystic triangle. That's when you can get into trouble of unintended direct application. So that's one reason why we never prefer regional or spinal anesthesia for laparoscopic cholecystectomy. The second manner in which the electrosurgical unit can fail is called direct coupling. Direct coupling is the activation of the electrosurgical unit with the active electrode in close proximity to another metal instrument, thus damaging tissues, organs, viscera not within the visual field that are in direct contact with the secondary instrument. It can be avoided by visualizing as much of the length of the electrode as possible on the monitor. So it should be in vision, the shaft of the active energy delivering instrument. Avoiding contact with any other conductive instruments prior to activating the electrode. Now, this is what is called direct coupling. You see here the electrode delivering the energy from the electrosurgical unit is in very close proximity, or in fact, even at times it may touch the telescope, the metallic part of the telescope. And in that situation, any bowel or any organ that is coming in contact with the telescope is going to sustain injury. Inadvertent contact between an active electrode and the laparoscope can lead to an unrecognized bowel injury, especially if a plastic non-conductive cannula is used. This is very important. I'll build up a case of why plastic is not the ideal conductor from this aspect of consideration. The third way the electrosurgical unit can fail and deliver a disaster to our patient is insulation failure. Insulation failure happens because of excessive use of reusable instruments, repetitive passage through trocars, and frequent mechanical and chemical enzymatic sterilizations. They inherently damage the insulating sheets of instruments. It is very important to actually inspect. I've got a very beautiful magnifying glass. Whether I can show it, I am not sure whether it will show you here. It's a magnifying glass which is lighted. It's got a LED light here. When you put it on, this light glows. So what I inspect the sheets of my instruments with this magnifying glass usually because the breaks are at times very small and difficult to be picked up with naked eye. So in case of insulation failure, just a moment. This study demonstrated the structure of a laparoscopic instrument that is delivering energy of the electrosurgical unit here. It's got 4 parts, and zone 1 is that part which is visible to the surgeon. Thankfully, most of the breaks of insulation happen in this area, which are visible. So surgeon will avoid or get the sheath changed. The second zone is the most tricky zone. It is not visible to the surgeon. It's outside of the monitor view and outside of the trocar also. And it has been estimated that 18% of sheath failures of insulation happen in this zone. And if you use such an instrument to deliver the energy, you're heading for a disaster. The authors concluded that the chance and significance of injury from insulation failure are a function of the relative location of the point of failure. So it depends on which point it is failing. If it fails at this here, chances are that the surgeon will avoid any injury. But in these areas, it can cause havoc. This is the graphic of depiction of insulation failure. If you see, this is the break in the sheath, any bowel coming here or in the vicinity also. If the cautery is in the spray mode, it'll leak from here and cause a disaster. And if it's a direct contact, then there's a guarantee that something is going to go wrong.
KJ, I think we need to conclude so that we have some time for discussion also.
I'll take you for the last 1 or 2 slides, sir. Very important. Capacitive coupling is the coupling which happens beside from all the upper 4 causes which I have mentioned. And I'll take you to the graphic of how it happens. The capacitive coupling and why the trocar should be of metal. Capacitive coupling is happening when this trocar is of plastic and there is accumulation of current here, which from the active instrument sheath. And if this trocar had been of metal, it would have dissipated complete current through the grounding pad. But being of plastic, this current is accumulating here and it can cause visceral damage to any structure which is coming here. I'll skip through. This is the capacitive coupling, which is important. You see, there is no direct contact of this tip with any viscera, but there's a current buildup here between the metal and the plastic area, which is damaging the viscera, any viscera coming in contact with it. So precautions: carefully inspect the instrument for insulation break. Use the lowest possible power setting necessary. Do not activate the electrode in open circuit. Do not activate the instrument in close proximity or direct contact with another instrument. Keep instruments clean and smooth, as eschar coagulum buildup can cause impedance and adhere instruments to undesired blood vessels or nerves. Use brief intermittent activation versus prolonged activation. Use bipolar whenever appropriate. Avoid using a hybrid system, metal and plastic components, to avoid capacitive coupling. Ideal power setting for coagulation, very important for general surgeons, is 30 to 50 watts. Ideal power setting for cutting is 50 to 80 watts. Consider using, and this is something very important, you must invest on this, consider using an active electrode monitoring system in the electrosurgical unit to decrease the risk of insulation failure and capacitive coupling. And do not bundle multiple cords on the surgical field. When not in use, place the active electrode in an insulated holster on the patient rather than directly on the drapes in the surgical field. I'll skip through I'll take on to the last. This is most important. Another hardware failure which can cause damage is thermal injury from fiber optic cables. The temperature at the tip of the fiber optic cables can go to as high as 260 degrees centigrade, and it can burn the surgical drapes as well as skin down to the subcutaneous tissue, even when not in contact from distance of 3 millimeters. Be very careful. Burns can happen from hot cautery tips not properly cared for, improper application of the grounding pad, and alternative site burns whenever the patient is touching a metallic part which is grounded. Shocks to the surgeon assistant can happen. Surgical smoke, we heard yesterday, that was another failure which can happen. A penetrating missile injury by sudden oxygen release from compressed oxygen cylinder caused a mortality. This was published from AIIMS, and anticipating problems takes away their damaging potential. To foresee is to govern. Your solutions may fail, but you should have solutions ready. Carry home messages: invest serious effort and time, not only in chiseling your surgical skills, but also knowing the full potential of weapons in your quiver. Acquire at least more than basic troubleshooting skills of all hardware and software in your OR. Always be ready for a bailout option in case of malfunction of machines in your OR. This is a quiz which I'll come to later. A happy new year to all of you in advance. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. KJ. Excellent talk. And to ignite us, I would say I would have a couple of comments here that Dr. KJ aptly pointed out about the hardware things. I would say that we are now well aware that we are operating in different settings where we have now laparoscopic surgery right from a 3-chip camera to multi HDD, now going to have a 4D, 4K. What message we should keep in mind is one should be aware of what we have when we are starting our surgery with, and what are the essential components of the hardware one should have. And absolutely like WHO safety checklist, while performing a simple operation like cholecystectomy, which is one of the commonest surgery, which is a very disastrous effect if the complications occurs, leading to loss of life and morbidity and financial losses. One should definitely invest on how their hardware is and how it is kept properly. This will prevent things rather than treating the complications later on. I open the house for questions.
Hi, Dr. KJ, it was a really very good presentation. Just to start the conversation, while somebody else starts some question, I think for any hardware thing, the most important thing is your team which is maintaining it. I think that teamwork is the most crucial thing, because by the time a surgeon starts the surgery, he is already preparing for the patient, for his investigations, evaluation, preparing the surgery, thinking of the steps. So the other aspect which is to be worked out in the background is a good skilled staff who is available to do that. We have been emphasizing for last almost for one day that you should have a good assistant for a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, meaning to say the Dr. Sadiq had emphasized the person who is retracting the fundus of the gallbladder has to be very good. Second, then we were emphasizing on the cameraman who has to be very good. In continuation, I think we need to have somebody who can just maintain your instrumentation also as a for the laparoscopic procedure.
Absolutely true, Dr. Ajay. There's no doubt about that. In what all you said is perfectly true. But as I said, we are practicing in two different realms. You must see how lap chole is being practiced in the field. The bulk of the procedures are being done in a very, very neglected manner. We have to accept that. First of all, if we do not accept that, then we cannot proceed ahead. You see, there is a major compromise in almost all aspects of conduct of the procedure in the field. There is no question of dedicated staff being allocated to maintain the instruments, because surgeon is the captain of the ship. Eventually, whatever wrong or good is happening, the surgeon has to take the onus. So in the field, this my talk was is to target young surgeons which are going out in the field. See, they're going to do it. They're going to do lap chole. They're going to drive. They're going to keep all the luggage, all the equipment of lap chole in the car. You can't prevent that. It's not going to. No matter. There's no law which can prevent that. So better it is to learn. They should educate themselves about all hardware problems, so that at least that part is taken care of.
Dr. Sadiq Sikora has raised a hand. Can he be unmuted? Just a second.
Yeah,
So,
thank you
yes,
guys for
yes.
addressing this important issue. I understand that there are two sort of worlds we are looking at, and what you have pointed out emphasizes the fact the additional responsibility of surgeons who practice in the field, because this is a very important area. But having said that, it's not difficult to implement, in the sense, what I mean to say is, adoption of WHO surgical safety list should be mandatory, uniform in all aspects. It's not a very difficult thing. It's a very simple process. And the safety list itself recommends additional points, what you need for local places. And I think when we do these kind of surgeries, especially with this utilization of laparoscopic equipment, we should mandatorily add the checking of equipment as part of the WHO surgical safety list. So it becomes a comprehensive list rather than different things which we are doing at every stage. And I know it is difficult, not only in the field, but even in places that I work in. And I've been trying to encourage people to include that in the pre-operative workup or prior to surgery, putting up checklists in the operating theater, assigning responsibilities with not 100% success. But I think it should be done, as you have shown, that it can lead to adverse and significant complications in the long run. So thank you for sharing that. And I think we should add this to our checklist procedure, the looking at the equipment.
Thank you so much, sir. I
Can I make
appreciate
a
it.
comment, sir? This. Can I make a comment, sir?
Yes,
This
last
is
comment.
the
Yes, in the audience,
the
Dr.
other,
KJ Singh.
KJ.
Hi.
We've actually been classmates long time back,
Yeah.
and I'm Dr. KJ
Must
from
have
the
been a
army.
big confusion then, both KJs.
Okay. And this is a very important aspect which has often been neglected. And I suggest that it be included in the curriculum. We encourage classes for this thing. You can have fault at multiple levels. The light going off when you are doing the artery, or there's a bleeder from the use of cautery, as you very rightly pointed out, common points where a young surgeon can make a disastrous mistake is using the cautery when the entire metal part is not seen and something is being injured. The instrument should only be introduced after the lead has been put on, because if somebody is putting the lead from behind, accidentally it gets pushed inside and the cautery is activated, it can cause serious injuries. And the third is where the foot switch, foot pedal with any energy should always be with the operating surgeon. And you should never, suppose you change your position, you ask somebody to activate the foot pedal, it is disastrous. These are small practical problems, and as Dr. KJ rightly pointed out, that we should be slightly more than very basic in all our instrumentation, managing them and seeing them and stopping a disaster from occurring before actually the equipment gives way. So very pertinent, and we should include it in our curriculum.
Thank you.
Dr.
KJ.
Sandeep, please close the session.
Yeah, with this, I would like to actually thank Dr. Kapoor for asking me to chair this session, and in interest of time, we should go ahead and for the next session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.